I just love a good summer read, don't you? I just love where we can just take some practical time to have health. Just say healthy, healthy, healthy. Just need some healthy relationships. We spend so much time doing healthy other things, but healthy relationships are what endures. So we're going to be hanging out in heaven. Might as well get it right here. Oh. Right? Fuddy-duddies over here or nothing. So we are probably going to spend the next 3 Wednesdays wrapping up the book. And so we're going to probably do a little combination over the next few weeks because we're kind of getting the drift, aren't we? Are we getting the drift a little bit? Anybody been practicing at all? Anyone had any qualifying events? It's amazing how many qualifying events. Amazing how many things we have underneath the surface, right? So I just always like to ask the Holy Spirit to come and search our hearts. And, you know, his objective is, don't you? The Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, does anybody know the Holy Spirit? Oh, it feels like a trick question, doesn't it? What's the Holy Spirit's objective? What's the Holy Spirit? He's the helper. The Holy Spirit's the helper. That word doesn't mean as much as I hope it'll mean to you, but that just means everything you need. He's got some helps. Anyway, I love to explore relationships and feelings and emotions, and I like to make healthy people. Don't you like to not live triggered? Sidwell was triggered last night, and was that just last night? We're Monday night. What is today? Who am I? Where am I? Who is my mother? Monday night, she was standing in the kitchen and she had the trigger face on. I said, "Are you triggered?" And she said, "I am." And I said, "Stop it." So she did. That's all we needed right there. I can practice on any of y'all if you want to give me opportunity. Anyway, I like a good trigger, but I like a good truth too. We don't want to live from trigger to trigger.
I prefer truth.
You prefer truth?
I prefer truth, yeah. Truth over triggers, I say.
Truth over triggers.
We should make a T-shirt out of that, too.
Let's get a T-shirt going. That's our 7th T-shirt. The 7th is completed.
So we have a bunch of T-shirts up in our head that we've made.
In our noggin.
Our noggin.
So tonight we are moving on to chapter 6. Now this little section, is about things about herself. I don't know if you know where she's going with this, but pretty soon she's going to get to others. So really our problems are made up of what we feel inside or what you're doing. True? Did anybody do anything today that you're like, Anybody have that happen today? No, not at all. Just me. Yeah. Well, maybe we can answer some of those questions for you along the way. Anyway, so I'm excited about this chapter. This is a great chapter. This is one that I would say in all my years of counseling, it's probably the one people do the most. And sometimes it's kind of incognito. Mm-hmm. But it's about numbing. Does anybody know what that means? And, isn't it great that we have social media to aid in our numbing activities? So we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight. And, of course, she's reaching a vast audience, not just one-lifers. And so, there's some extra commentary she makes. And, we've tried to kind of simplify it for you a little bit on our handout. But Shooty and Mood are going to pass out you a little handout. And we just want to applaud Mendel one more time for doing a handout. And Teresa for making it pretty.
I was going to say, all those beautiful, colorful charts. Yes.
Almost got a golf clap, but, since I'm in charge, I can rally the troops.
Yeah. I think it's genuine. I think they meant it. I think it was authentic. I think it was an authentic clap for you, for us.
Now I've been watching a little Wimbledon, and so, they've all had knee problems this year. In fact, it's known as the year of the knee problems. So, how many been having knee problems? So, be sure and be praying. It's an indicator of something else. Don't you like that God just uses stuff on our physical man to tell us what's going on in the supernatural? How many have figured that out yet? That way you don't all have to run to the emergency room every 5 minutes. That's why they made the emergency room, and that's why it costs $5,000. Saw some rabbits go by. I almost chased them,
Oh boy.
but I held up.
On a rabbit trail.
I'm a wabbit twirl.
A wabbit trail. You almost went down a wabbit
I
trail?
almost went down a wabbit twirl, but I held up.
Way to go.
Okay. That made someone laugh really hard. Okay. So let's get started, and then we'll see where we go. And are y'all having fun? Got lots of snacks for you to keep you coming. Yep. Go for it, Miha.
Okay. So I shouldn't feel like numbing my emotions, which I have to say, to start off with, I love that we're even talking about feelings at all, because I came from the past where feelings were just a problem, and the less you had, the better off you were. So it's great to know that God actually meant for our emotions to be alive and active, and we actually are supposed to feel things, and it is supposed to be a part of our everyday life. And this chapter addresses what I found myself doing in just about every way possible in life before I realized that feelings were something that God meant even to use as a language to speak to us. So numbing behaviors are really prevalent in our society in a number of really obvious ways, but I think there are some subtle ways that I know I've caught myself and others just slipping into that maybe aren't noticeably as obvious as a technique for numbing emotions or dealing with the stress of life, And so I think you'll find some things I think everyone's going to see something in here for to apply personally. So what are we talking about here? We start off on that first bullet point with an example. This girl, Erica, is saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. Lately, several times a week, on my way home from work, I stop at a gas station, buy a big bag of potato chips, and down the entire bag in my car. Has anybody ever done that? Just replace it with ice cream. Has anybody ever done that? Cookies. Yeah. Cookies. Yes. Yeah.
That's your salty island.
Yeah. Pizza. There's so many options conveniently available. Okay. So Erica's secret numbing confession about compulsively reaching for chips as her secret way of numbing the stress of a new job is only one of countless like it that I've heard from clients and friends, and I've noticed it in myself. Most people are struggling with some type of numbing behavior, and they're also beating themselves up for it. The truth is, you probably weren't taught how to cope with painful emotions or stress in healthy ways. As a result, you may have learned to cope with pain by numbing your emotions or constantly distracting yourself. I think that's a good way of putting it. When we may not say that we're numbing, we may not acknowledge or admit that we're actually trying to stop feeling things. But I catch myself a lot trying to distract myself. Like I need something occupying my mind, because my mind will go somewhere. Like even if I wake up in the middle of the night and I've had a bad dream or something that's upsetting me, well, I go to something else to distract me from what I had going on. And so it's, I think, distracting yourself and numbing your emotions, we can kind of interchange here for tonight. So she gives an example of a typical day when this kind of thing comes up. You're overwhelmed with too much to do. You've got a work deadline to meet and a couple of restless children who are home from school for the summer. Your house is a mess. Your refrigerator is empty. You're hosting friends for your weekly book club. You haven't eaten yet, and you can't remember the last time you combed your hair. As you anticipate the day ahead of you, your mind sounds a little like this. I'm hungry. My house is a mess. Oh my gosh, I've got people coming over. I haven't even prayed yet. I need to get to work. I really should exercise. I need to take a shower. What's wrong with me? I don't have time for any of this. And then the guilt messages enter in, adding pressure to what is already a pressure-filled situation. I should learn to plan better. I always do this to myself. I really should work on setting better boundaries. Anybody relate to that scenario? Yeah. So the inner chaos of your mind starts to run roughshod over your best efforts. And then the numbing kicks in. You procrastinate and scroll social media for a few hours. You stress snack and empty an entire bag of cookies while cranking out your work. You buy a brand new set of dishes that you don't really need. You pour yourself into organizing your garage instead of simply tidying up. You compulsively counsel your friends while ignoring your own exhaustion. That covers a lot of bases there. When you are unsure of how to tend to the chaos in your own mind, when you're unsure of how to tend to the chaos within your own mind, you do something or anything to distract yourself or remove all that pressure. Again, remember how we talked about last time that we will naturally try to get ourselves out of a tension. That's a normal reaction, whether it's not like we have to sit down and decide, I think I will make a deliberate effort to stop being in tension right now. No, like we will naturally do something without consciously thinking about it to remove tension. So all of that becomes a downward spiral when you start to just try to do anything to distract yourself from the pressure. And the more you numb, the more you distract, the more your untended emotions ratchet up, and the more you turn back to numbing. So it's a cycle that just feeds itself and amplifies it over and over and over. All the while, your circumstances don't change. So this is a lot of activity going on in your mind, a lot of stuff going on, possibly even in your room or in your home or wherever you're at, but nothing's actually addressing the real issue. Circumstances aren't changing in that cycle. And you might pull the day off. You might even meet the work deadline, but you feel terrible inside. And that's one thing I've loved about this house and this culture is we've talked about whether or not you were in your sweet spot. I don't think we've talked about that quite as often, use that terminology as much. But the first few years that I started coming here, we talked about your sweet spot. I didn't even know there was a sweet spot, like I said, to life. There wasn't a way to stay in your sweet spot if you found one. And so then I hear that that's actually the goal, and that's the life Jesus intended for you. And he made a way for you to stay and live your life hour after hour, day after day in your sweet spot. So, the goal becomes different when you acknowledge that your goals, your daily goals change when you acknowledge the goal of being able to stay and live out of your sweet spot. Okay? Because before, for me, like meeting a work deadline, well, that's all I needed to do. Making sure the dishes were done, check. Like my goal was just that it was so low. It was there. But just because I was able to power through and get those things done, it didn't really mean anything if I felt miserable at the end of the day. And so we should maybe do a little self-inventory about what our goal, how we view our day. When you get up in the morning, is your goal that day just to task a bunch and get a bunch of stuff done? Is it just to put in your 8 hours at work or whatever? Like, what is your goal? It might be a good thing to look at. Or is your goal to actually stay in your sweet spot more than 50% of the time, where you feel that peace and calm and joy and the presence of God and all of that. So that makes a big difference. Numbing keeps you from the chaos-shattering, light-breaking run-in with reality that empowers you to take charge of yourself and delight in your life. So did you catch that? You need to actually run in face-to-face. You need to actually collide with your reality. Like it needs to hit us in the face. We need to not be disillusioned about what the status of our life is. That's not living if you just continue to deceive yourself and do all of those mind traps that we talked about last week. And so we need it. We need to run into it face to face and actually get a good look at it. Because when we're numbing, the real problem or the challenges you face aren't even getting named. We're just avoiding them day after day. And so they just keep building up and stacking up. So this next section on the next page is numbing emotions versus naming emotions. Numbing is the opposite of naming. So naming is more of a term we've learned in this book, right? But she's made it a pretty big point for us to learn that there's actually a lot of power in just naming something, not just to give it a name, but to be able to say it out loud, because you're being truthful with yourself. First and foremost, you're being honest with yourself when you bother to give a feeling or a situation or some sort of problem a name. And then the next step is to even be able to tell a friend, to say it out loud to somebody. It actually, remember, scientifically proven that it changes the chemistry in your brain and brings the situation down just to give it a name. So while numbing is a choice of going down a road that's already heading in a bad direction when you're numbing, naming is also already putting you on a path towards gaining ground and gaining peace in your life, just by naming it. So it's when you attempt to mute or suppress uncomfortable feelings that's what numbing is. Mute or suppress. Instead of naming painful emotions, you try to make them go away. You work to keep them outside of your conscious awareness. Numbing might work for a little while, but the problem is that those emotions don't go away. They linger untended in your body and soul, where they fester and create bigger problems over time. Numbing can sneak up on you in several ways. It might start with minor distractions. For example, you might distract yourself from the stress of a hard day by scrolling social media, having a glass of wine, or binge watching TV. On any given day, those actions may not be a problem, right? Those things are not in and of themselves some blatant sin or some horrible thing to do. But why are you doing it is the question, and how is your is it a behavior that you've created that's become habitual? So if you consistently distract yourself day after day and never face the reality of underlying stress or painful emotions, you're likely to develop an unhealthy reliance on numbing behavior or possibly form an addiction. So those kinds of activities are not a big deal if you're actually you might just be taking a break from dealing with things. That's different than continuously just avoiding it, one way after another. If you're taking a break and you're giving yourself a little rest, not a big deal, as long as you get back to the reality of what's going on and then actually do something about it. So sometimes we've learned this behavior of numbing as a child. If no one taught us how to manage hard feelings, cope with pain, self-soothe in healthy ways, you might have learned to numb yourself. In some cases, numbing was the only way to survive. And I would say most of us know, like our parents' generation, this wasn't a priority. We're not that far off, that many generations from the Depression, where it was just try to eat, stay alive. So this emotional mental health thing, that wasn't even a priority when I was growing up. No one was talking about that. We're just barely starting to talk about it. So when we grew up, we may have learned some things that now we do just habitually without thinking about it. One extreme example on the more extreme side is cutting, which is a more prevalent problem these days. And it actually is the same thing as maybe just stealing a Dr. Pepper or sneaking a Dr. Pepper in your room at night. It's a way to express emotions or numb your emotions without actually having to deal with them. So if you are just if you grew up in a lot of trauma, you may have learned some pretty drastic methods for numbing. But we also, people who just maybe had heard their parents fighting or had stress in the home on any level, and any kind of stress, life was just going on. If no one was there to teach you how to do it, you may have learned to sneak a Dr. Pepper, hide food under your bed, or, some little thing that just made you feel like you were getting away with something, and then you could soothe and comfort yourself with that. And those things carry on with us into adulthood, even when we're out of the traumatic or stressful situations that we grew up in. That's the sad thing, is that we just then apply it to the next stressful thing in life. The problem of numbing is compounded by the fact that we live in an age when numbing and distractions are available to us as never before. The options for numbing uncomfortable emotions or distracting ourselves from them in effortless and addictive ways are endless. Our hearts, minds, and bodies ache for care and attention, but counterfeit versions of comfort are everywhere. And that's what we have to recognize that they are. They are counterfeits. And that's another big thing I learned when I first started coming to One Life, is that my needs were not bad. My needs didn't mean something was wrong with me. God actually made me to have needs, and God actually made a way for those needs to be met. So if you're just trying to make them stop, then that's another thing that's going to keep you trapped in numbing. But once you recognize that your needs aren't bad, that immediately breaks off a lot of shame and fear and that kind of thing, and it opens up that doorway to find actual ways to care for your needs rather than the counterfeit ways that just put a Band-Aid on things. Let's see. Instead of minding our minds, remember that's what we're supposed to be learning how to do in this book? Minding our minds. Living life thinking is what we said. Instead of minding our minds, we drown out inner noise with outer distractions. Did you catch that? It's inner noise using outside things to distract us. Instead of slowing our bodies down, we amp them up with sugar, caffeine, or adrenaline. Instead of caring for our painful emotions, we get hooked on other people's drama. Instead of connecting with others, we mindlessly rush from appointment to appointment. So she's really good in this chapter about making sure we don't get into any shame here. There's no actual shame in numbing, remember? So we're not doing the I shouldn't feel that way thing. We're not saying I shouldn't feel shame for this. Okay, I shouldn't be numbing. We're not doing that. It's often a survival skill. It's also incredibly hard to avoid in our modern world, but it's a reality that we need to name and bravely face. Numbing creates bigger problems over time. It also keeps you from the real comfort and care your soul desperately needs. And again, that's what this whole book is about, is that if you don't live thinking, these things cause your life to be driven on autopilot. And so you end up somewhere that's not where you really chose to be in life. You may say, well, I believe this, I believe that, and I have these morals and I have these goals in life. But if you aren't living life thinking, these types of things in our life are actually what's driving the car of your life. And so you end up in situations and in places years down the road that's not where you meant to be, and you don't even know how you got there. And so living life thinking is, again, what we're doing here and what this is all about. So again, it's not bad that you have a need to numb. It's not bad that maybe you do numb occasionally. This is about a habit of consistently avoiding dealing with the feelings that you have. Let's see, naming numbing behaviors. If you're feeling discontent or frustrated in your life, but you don't know why, the first thing you might need to name is the very thing you relied upon to keep the pain away. So you might need to name your numbing behavior. So one of the things that she does in this chapter is really good, is shows a few entrance points for how to start this process. Because usually if this numbing type of behavior is going on, then it's something that's kind of vague, it's cloudy, you don't know, and the first step isn't just to suddenly diagnose the very root of the problem and then suddenly solve your biggest problem in life with this chart, okay? This is about peeling back some of the layers and seeing what you discover. And the framing process will help you discover what you do next, of course, with your brave step, right? So the first thing you might do is just feel like recognize that you're frustrated or that you're discontent, that you're not happy, that you've got stress. And you might recognize that you are doing something to avoid that. Just ask yourself, well, if you recognize the issue, what are you doing about it? Well, you might very well find that you're just consistently going to turn on the TV. Or I've caught myself, like when I go to bed at night, sometimes I'll be exhausted, but then I'll find that I'll just want to watch another show. And then just one more after that, and one more after that. And I will put off going to sleep because even though I'm exhausted, maybe I only slept 3 hours the night before, but then finally my day's done and I could go to bed. But instead of going to sleep, I stay up and I do something. And I'm kind of like in this haze, I'm not even thinking straight. And then I'll realize, and what is that you call the little girl that needs a nap? What is that you say? 2-year-old little toddler, she'll see me acting some ways and she's like, you're just tired. You're tired. Go take a nap. but I won't want to go to sleep. I'm like that little toddler that doesn't want to take a nap, but they're, when you're looking at that little child and you're like, you need a nap. There's no doubt about it. But when we get kind of delirious, we're not necessarily thinking straight. So some of those things are numbing behaviors that we do. And in the moment, you may not catch it. But if the next night, when your alarm goes off the next morning and you're like, what was I thinking? I had a full 8 hours. I could have slept there and I only got 5 because I watched that stupid show. It wasn't even any good. The next morning is usually when you realize what you did the night before, right? Yeah. So that might be the time to then stop and notice, hey, I think I'm doing a numbing behavior by binge watching TV when I should be sleeping.
Yeah, I have to add something right there. I think it's really good to, when I met Cece, she dreams about this all the time too, but she had given away all her needs to just care for her child. And so it was really hard for her at first to even figure out. I think that's why that she would do that occasionally, because it was hard for her to figure out what was kind of replenishing, which of course we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I think without her, we didn't have this book, but I would help her just identify just by saying, what's the real need or what's the real thought going on in her mind. And it really does come more down to that when we're just putting off things that we feel ill-equipped or ill-educated to understand about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when we can realize that, I think for me, I think I'm pretty self-aware of what I need like throughout the day, and I'm able to not just put it all off till the end of the day. And I think that's really important too, to realize that, when we're really busy, we're really not paying attention or thinking about what's depleting us. And so then at the end of the day, sometimes we don't know exactly what we need. And so we can just turn to something that's an old thing that's really not even replenishing at all.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's not you're not going to do your best thinking at that point because you're worn out, So, but you might be able to catch the behavior at least, which is what this is saying, is that when you go to bed and a lot of times we know, man, I'm not in a good place, but I'm just going to plop down on the couch and watch something, or I'm going to eat a giant bowl of ice cream, whatever it is, I mean, we kind of know that I just want to, just forget all this and have to do something that feels good and is enjoyable to me. And that's not necessarily the time to diagnose and try to figure out exactly what's going on, but just notice what the behavior is that you came to mind to do. Even if you choose to do something else, you could jot down, hey, these are the things I was considering, doing in this moment, because that can be a starting place. Then the next day when you're rested and you can think and maybe talk with a friend or a counselor or somebody, then you can start looking at what that activity is and what is behind it, identify the real need, and then pursue learning how to care for yourself. So it all starts with naming is the thing. We've got to take some time to do that. So here's some of the most common examples of normal activities that can quickly turn into numbing behaviors: eating, watching TV or movies, browsing social media, working, helping others, spending, and using substances like alcohol or pills. Notice that helping others and actually working in there, workaholics, or like she said, you might just be on the phone helping all your friends, and you're actually just avoiding dealing with what's really going on in your own life. Or working extra hours at the office, or bringing your work home with you because it's easier to focus on that than what's really going on at home. So when you do these activities mindfully, they can become a means of sparking imagination, connecting with others, or coping with stress. Problems arise when otherwise healthy activities become numbing behaviors, in which case you're not naming what's hard and coping with it, you're numbing. She says, I see these are often subtle, numbing behaviors in her clients all the time. They avoid emotional pain by throwing themselves into taking care of their family or friends. They avoid the stress of their family life by throwing themselves into work. And she gives some examples. I can't stop scrolling social media or streaming shows late at night. I'll stay up till 3 a.m. even though I'm exhausted. I just professed that one myself. What? That's right. Tracy stayed up till 5 a.m. watching Netflix. She's not in here to give us the dirty look, but she's watching us. She'll appreciate that later. Thanks for giving us a good example. Or, so I'm not the only one throwing myself under the bus here. She just sent a text that said, yes, I did. Sure did. She's not ashamed. She's practicing. She's not ashamed of that. Several times a week, I find myself sneaking away to down a box of cookies or a big bag of chips. I feel terrible afterward, but I can't stop myself. Or I compulsively buy things when I don't need them. I promise myself never to do it again, but it just keeps happening. Or I'm pouring myself a glass of wine, or 2 or 3, almost every night. I know I need to stop, but I just keep doing it. In each of these examples, there are several clues that suggest that the behavior is functioning as numbing. So she gives us 3 great clues here. The behavior, number 1, is the behavior is disrupting things you need, such as sleep, nutrition, connection with others, or financial stability. So like I said in my example, I know that if I'm physically exhausted, my body needs sleep. So I was robbing myself of physical rest because my mind wanted to numb from the emotions and the things that were going on in my mind. So it was disrupting things we actually need. That's a real blatant one. Nutrition's a good one. If we don't sneak off to eat asparagus or broccoli. We can't claim that that's usually, a healthy part of a healthy diet. If you're sneaking it in the first place, it's probably because maybe it's not the wisest thing to be doing, or at least the quantity that you're eating maybe is not considered healthy. So nutrition, connection with others. Obviously, if you're, I just made a choice actually because Tisa and I were trying to renew our commitment to get up and connect in the morning over my dreams, because we used to do that a long time ago. And so in this example, I was noticing that I would stay up later in the evenings kind of doing this type of thing because I wanted to have more downtime to myself. But what was I doing with my downtime? Well, I was kind of watching too many TV shows, really, rather than going to sleep. But I really wanted to be able to get up and connect with her on my dreams. So I had to choose to deliberately, I was losing connection because I needed to get up earlier to be able to do that with her. But if I continued to do the late night TV watching thing, I needed to sleep in more the next morning. So that was costing me connection. If I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't meet with you at 7 because I need my sleep after watching late night TV shows, then that's an example of it costing connection. So I made some adjustments so that I could do that because I valued the connection more than this. You can know when you're looking at it what the better payoff is. So the second clue is that the behavior is compulsive. You want to stop, but you can't. I think everybody's familiar with that one time or another at least. And number 3, there's an element of secrecy. You don't want other people to find out what you're doing. See, those are 3 simple and obvious things to answer about your behavior. I wasn't going to bed in my community at night saying, well, good night, I've got to go get ready for bed now so I can watch TV for 3 hours. I wasn't telling anybody that. I was just saying, I'm going to go get ready for bed now. I didn't tell anybody that part. So kind of obvious there. So it's crucial to name the numbing behaviors without shaming yourself. We often numb in secret, keeping the behaviors hidden from our conscious mind and other people. Did you catch that? We're really trying to keep it from ourselves. Like you can't hide from yourself, but we try. Secrecy facilitates denial. Remember we talked about denial last week, which is a trap that grows and develops bigger problems for you. So it's also where shame festers. So just doing something in secret facilitates denial, and it makes you more likely to begin to experience shame. So when you start to name your numbing behaviors, be gentle with yourself. Name them in your journal, name them to God. And when you do name them to someone else, ensure it's someone who will handle the naming with care. the care it deserves. Shame never helps. So you don't want to call up somebody and discuss this numbing behavior to somebody that's just going to dog on you or make you feel bad. That's not the kind of person you need to name it to, because you will basically shoot yourself in the foot in this process if you do that. You want to guard against anybody shaming you or any kind of guilt. So framing numbing behaviors. On the next page, there's a chart, one of Tisa's beautiful charts, where she put some questions that Dr. Cook suggested for framing. Remember, we're just framing the behavior at this point. So the goal for this is to understand the dynamics of the numbing behavior and how it has helped you cope. Okay, so you're going to actually look at it and say, well, how did this help me? Why did that work? Why did it work for you? Not everything works. You're obviously choosing certain behaviors over others. So why did it work? As you explore the following questions, you might want to talk about it with a safe friend or a therapist. And you want to, again, remember that you want to discuss this with someone who loves you and wants the best for you, because it will help your progress exponentially to work with somebody that you know is for you and is interested in your well-being. So remember, the F is for the facts. When do I numb? Is it late at night? Is it during the workday? On the weekend? How often does this happen? And again, these things might seem obvious, but go ahead and take the time to jot it down, because the whole picture. Remember, you're collecting truth pieces to make a bigger picture. So even though that's maybe an obvious one, go ahead and jot it down. Roots. Well, what triggers the numbing, and why do I want to change? What are your roots for, if you know that you get triggered by a certain event happening at work, or if your schedule feels really busy, or whatever it is that makes you need that thing even more, just try to identify that. But you also want to you also want to identify the root of why you want to change. That's important on that R step. Well, the root of why you're really motivated to do this, because if you keep that in front of you, you'll have better success. A is audit. What have I tried in the past to stop this behavior? What worked? What didn't? Mental messages. What shaming messages do I tell myself about numbing? And how can I reframe those messages in a compassionate way? Because you've probably already partnered with some of those shaming, guilt, negative mental messages. If you've developed a habit of a numbing behavior, you probably have a bunch of them. And so it would really be helpful to identify them and change them, because remember, she's already said that shame and guilt will sabotage your effort. And then expansion. What are some proven ways of reducing this numbing behavior? So again, this is where you may want to do a little bit of research and expand your options and expand the tools in your tool bag, so to speak, by talking with somebody that could give you some additional ideas. The looking tool, if you remember back from chapter 3, when we talked about framing, was another good one. So you want to looking back, how long has this numbing behavior been a problem? Is it new, or is it something I've done for a really long time? It may be one of those that came from childhood that you never even identified was a problem. It was just your normal. Or it might be something new that you discovered. Maybe you just signed up for Instagram, or maybe you just bought that ice cream. I don't know. Maybe you just allowed, who knows what it is. To see how long it's been going on, that's going to help you frame where these things are coming from and what you can do about them. Looking at today, what are other ways I can soothe or comfort myself? And some of us may already be doing, this isn't an all or nothing thing. So there may be things that you're doing to handle stress that are actually healthy and they work. But you may also other times be choosing an unhealthy alternative. So it'd be great to be able to identify those. If you already know some things that work, then you can look at, well, why do I choose which one I choose? So this is good information to gather. We're gathering all the truth pieces. Looking forward, what would my life look like if I didn't do this behavior? This was such a powerful one. What would I change? And I love the question she posed in chapter 3 was, what would it look like if I don't change? That's a very, very powerful truth piece right there. She goes on to say that reflecting on these questions will help you get a bigger picture of your numbing behavior. They're also going to help you gain insight into the emotions or events that are triggering it. For example, if you're mostly numbing at night, you might be worried, stressed, or lonely. If you're tempted to numb after work or during the summer when your kids are home, it might be that you're tired or overwhelmed. You can then begin to identify brave steps to change your numbing behavior.
Let's just pause.
Okay.
How many feel like that they can identify with what she's saying, then you have some numbing things you would like to change? Or I think it's really good I think we're going to have a little break here, and maybe you could just pause for a minute and think about writing down. Sometimes when we're talking about it, it's more of an activation. When you leave here, you'll get busy again. I just felt like today that'd be good for us to just pause and think about it. Being choleric, I don't do numbing things much because I'm busy. And, when I lay down at night, I'm asleep in 10 seconds. But, I think it's how many know somebody that does numbing behaviors that affect you. I think that's really important too, to have some language. It's not for you to go and tell them, hey, this is all about you, but to actually know there's something behind it. There's actually a bigger problem. And one of the things I've learned to do is that when I see someone doing a behavior, I'm just being Captain Obvious to say what the behavior is. But if I can try to be diplomatic and I can kind of phrase it in a way that opens up a door to them, I think Mendel can say for sure that I've done this a lot with her, to be able to say a way that would open the door to something that's actually I can see her doing, then that is what she's talking about. It's just an open door where there's no shame, because we're all just doing stuff that we don't like sometimes, and we're all, missing out on connections that we really want to have. We all get tired because we work hard. There's all those things are elements of our life. But for me, connecting with people and people I'm in relationship feel like I want to connect with them is a priority for me. And so when I see someone doing an activity, then I like to think about talking to them about it from a way that would make them not feel shame or guilt, but make them understand I desire connection. And I think that's just way more healthy. So maybe before, we run around and do too much here during our break, you could just think about yourself. Is there some behaviors you're doing, just to write them down on here so that when you have time later, like she said, to think about it, you can ask yourself those questions right there. I mean, do you even want to change it? Maybe you don't want to change it. Maybe you love it. Maybe you've found somebody and y'all both numb together, and so you don't care. But maybe it's something that you're looking at and you're like, yeah, I think there's more here that I could actually delve into. I could look at it a little bit different, or you could actually learn some tools to help somebody you're in relationship with that maybe it's doing it. Nobody likes to be in a relationship with someone that's just numbing all the time, working all the time, and not connecting with you, right? I mean, what's the point? I mean, you can do that with the wall. And so this is twofold to me always. Learning more about what I can do, learning more about how I can help others, and being a healthy person for them. So anyway, we are going to have our little break now. And, maybe if you have some questions, feel free to come up and we'll help you. But it might be good during our break to just take time to write some of those down, okay? Okay, we'll have a 10-minute break. Did y'all find some numbing behaviors? Video games should have made the list, shouldn't it? Guess what Shooties is? Where'd she go? Cleaning. Irrational cleaning.
I was going to tell.
I kind of understand that, actually. I will have that kick in every now and then.
I have that too. I was going to throw Tracy under the bus again because
Tracy, we're throwing you under the bus again.
A theme for tonight.
That's what you can do with roommates.
I was just telling Shooty that the other night when we were doing this remodel on the house, and so her room was completely destroyed and upended, and it was way past time to go to bed, and she was exhausted. I can't remember what else she'd done all that day. Anyways,
she'd stayed up till 5 watching Netflix.
No, this was This might have been why she stayed up till 5.
Okay.
No,
This was the same night.
no, this was earlier. Anyways,
Get some
there was a
texts explaining.
massive undertaking that needed to be done in order for her to get to her, make a path to get to her room and lay down and go to sleep for the night. And I caught her vacuuming the kitchen floor. And I'm
She's a
like,
good girl.
Tracy, what are you doing? Have you gone into a stupor? And she was like, yes, I have. And quickly put the vacuum away and went to deal with what was really the issue, you know? It was a great demonstration. A very good, a perfect example. Thank you, Tracy, for your example. All right. Are we
How are we
jumping back
feeling?
in?
Good.
Seen? That's how you're feeling? Yeah.
Feeling seen.
I feel seen too. It's good.
All right. Moving onward. What are we on?
Okay.
Page 5? Braving a change.
Yeah. So this is really good. So after you've named and framed, you know, we're going to brave a next step, which remember, you can always go back and name and frame again. And again, we're just working on naming the numbing behavior at this point. So if you've identified a behavior, the goal of braving is to reduce the numbing behavior and replace it with a more beneficial option. There are several ways to do this, and she gives us a good example, because remember, there's 3 categories you can choose. First off, 3 directions you can go when you start looking at braving a change. Is you can either fight for the thing that you've identified, you can suffer it wisely, or you can leave it. Remember those 3 that she talked about previously? So what does that look like in this scenario? You might fight for a healthier relationship with a specific numbing behavior, or you might suffer it wisely for a clear reason, or you might leave a numbing behavior behind entirely. No matter which choice you make, you'll need to expand your range of healthy ways to care for yourself. And we'll talk more about that. But as Tisa and I were just discussing on the break, it's critical, a real issue, probably the biggest issue connected to this is the ability to care for yourself. And like she and I were just discussing personally that Tisa grew up with an expectation of her needs being met. So that was solid in her. And so she doesn't have very many numbing type behaviors because I think to me, it's about the expectation of having your needs met. So even if she doesn't know how to meet the need, she has a reasonable expectation that she'll be able to figure out how to meet the need. Whereas from the background I came from, I mean, I turned off all my needs. And so I certainly didn't think there was a way to care for them. And if there was, like I said earlier, I started believing that my needs weren't bad and God actually made me with those needs. But then I had no idea how to meet them. I had no idea. And my expectation for them being met was really low because it was just a new concept. So again, this is pointing us towards learning a range of healthy ways to care for yourself. And I think we have to give ourselves a lot of grace and mercy here, because you can't just learn overnight suddenly what we should have learned our whole life growing up. You know, it takes time. And so identifying one of these numbing behaviors doesn't mean you suddenly are an expert at how to meet the need. And so this is not something that's probably going to happen overnight or even just a couple of nights. It's a lengthier process because you have to give yourself time to learn a healthier option. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that will come into play as you've named a numbing behavior, what your choice is at this step, that will impact that. So let's look at fighting for a behavior. So you want to work on preserving the good that you enjoy, but in moderation. So this is, in other words, you've identified a numbing behavior. You don't want to stop it completely because you like what it adds to your life, but you do want to learn how to not compulsively do that thing to just self-soothe when you need a healthier option. So she gives the example of secretly turning to pizza for comfort when you're anxious or lonely. Secretly turning to pizza for comfort when anxious or lonely is not actually providing you with the friend that you need in moments of pain or loneliness. And I don't know, I just liked the way she said that. Like, I thought, well, I don't think I thought about TV being my friend. It just felt like it would be relaxing or whatever. But I think that's a good question we can even ask. Like, are you the friend I need? Bag of chips, are you the friend that I really need right now? I mean, I think that's just a good question for this moment. Is that thing that you're partnering with really a friend to you? That highlights a lot of things for me. So reminding yourself that pizza is a comfort best enjoyed with other people reframes your desire in a way that helps you not shame yourself. So in other words, you're saying, I do really love pizza, and I do find pizza to be a comfort food, but yes, she agrees. We love pizza, but it's really better and it's healthier when it's enjoyed with other people. So you've reframed your desire to keep pizza as a part of your life. But you're then able to make wiser choices, choosing an alternative from those you've identified that provide true comfort. So in other words, it's that secret part, right? If you're like, man, I'm just going to go home and I don't know how, I don't use pizza for this. I don't know. What do? Put a pizza in the microwave? I don't know. Do you get out the cold pizza from the fridge? I don't know how you do this secretly, because to me, it's obvious if you're cooking a pizza or ordering one. That's too much work for my phlegmatic side. Carton of ice cream, that's ready to go. Right there in the freezer. But anyways, you know how it happens. Cold pizza, yeah. I mean, there's lots of DiGiorno, I did used to have that. Yeah. Cold pizza, yeah.
No, it's got to go in there and
Yeah.
get all crispy and everything.
Yeah, well, no, I'm okay with cold pizza. So we've determined that it is possible to have pizza in secret. That's what we've determined. We had a council and a meeting of the minds and determined it was possible. Okay. So it's the in secret part. So if you want to tell yourself, hey, I'm going to allow myself to have pizza, but I'm going to cut out the secret part and doing it late at night or when no one's looking, then that would help you frame when you enjoy pizza. So you kind of give yourself a little more specific rules about when you might enjoy pizza, is what she's saying. So if you recognize you want pizza in the middle of the night or whatever, then you say, hey, you know what? This isn't the time I'm getting together with people. So I need to, not going to get together with pizza either. I'm going to do something different here. And then you choose something different. So can you see how she reframed it and said, hey, this is not an altogether bad thing, but this is a way that I know it's healthy. If I'm enjoying it with other people, I know I'm doing it in a healthy way. That's just an example. This same type of moderation can be applied to other behaviors such as scrolling media or spending. For example, you could make a rule for yourself that you're going to pick one day a week to scroll or post on social media. And then you could maybe even just take the apps off of your phone for the rest of the week. Or if shopping or spending money was your vice, you could intentionally plan a time for shopping with a friend and then remove your credit card from online shopping sites. So this is similar to the pizza example, that shopping in itself, you're not going to stop shopping altogether, but you're going to hold that carrot out there for, I'm going to plan a really fun shopping trip and say, that's when I'm really going to get to enjoy that thing. But I'm not going to try to get my fix from shopping when I'm just laying in bed and shopping on my phone at night. So you separate those things in a way that frame them. So obviously, if you go shopping, one day intentionally, you're probably going to be a little more mindful about what you're spending than if you're just mindlessly ordering stuff over and over on Amazon. So that's if you were going to fight for keeping a behavior in your life. The next one is suffering certain numbing behaviors wisely. So you may determine after framing it that you're going to suffer through this numbing behavior wisely. For example, if TV helps to deal with loneliness at night, but it's interfering with your sleep, then you minimize the intrusion by tuning into an audiobook instead. So audiobooks are less disruptive to sleep than staring at the blue light of a screen. So then you can set a timer that switches off after a certain time. So in other words, you recognize that you have loneliness and you need something to distract you. You're doing this TV watching thing or whatever the numbing behavior is to distract you from loneliness. So in this example, you're saying, well, I can't talk myself out of being lonely. And it's just a fact. I feel lonely. So I do need something to help me kind of cope with this time, with this issue, but I'm going to choose more wisely. TV, the blue light, it stimulates you. It actually works against your body from going to sleep. Whereas an audiobook, you're more likely to fall asleep and go ahead and fall asleep if you don't have that light on. You can close your eyes and listen to an audiobook, right? So you put some things in place. You choose something that will still help with the need to solve the loneliness or help you cope with the loneliness. But you choose something that protects the need of sleep also. And then you can, obviously, if you can set a timer that switches off after a certain time, then you're helping to protect yourself in that way. Another example with this is a really great one, I think, is that if someone is processing trauma for the first time and they're beating themselves up for the needing to quit smoking cigarettes as a way of dealing with anxiety, they might be in this situation where they want to quit smoking? Yes. Is this a good time in their life? No. They're maybe going through an extreme emotional process. Maybe they're dealing with something they've never dealt with before. They're undergoing some really deep healing and processing a lot of difficult things. That might not be the wisest time to stop or try to break this particular numbing behavior. And a lot of us might recognize we have more than one numbing behavior, and you're going to have to just do one at a time with those two. So again, that's another reason why you have to keep shame out of the process. And it is a process. It's not a quick fix overnight thing. This is about living, thinking, and making choices. Remember when we talked about the gift of agency, where you're shifting from being a victim to a habit that you can't seem to stop out of a need that you can't quite meet yet. You're a victim to it. Rather, you're switching from that to choosing. I'm choosing of my own free will as not a victim, but out of the power of choice. I am choosing to continue this behavior while I seek help to solve this need. That is what she's talking about when she says suffering something wisely. So this particular example, she talks about, well, if the person's smoking because of anxiety, then rather than try to wean off of cigarettes at that point in time, they're going to intentionally seek some treatment for anxiety, some options for dealing with anxiety. So it's an example of maybe allowing this numbing behavior to continue for a short while you actively do something about your underlying reason for it. Now, again, it's really, really important to make those kind of decisions with wise counsel. Because if you remember last week, we talked about all the mind traps that involve the rationalization, the denial, the all or nothing thinking. You may not be able to see it clearly. And so if you're going to choose something like this, and this person was, going through counseling and therapy for a childhood trauma, so they had a professional they were running this by. So don't make those decisions in secret either. Okay, you might just be doing another numbing behavior. Might just be justifying your numbing behavior. But there are examples where you might not, the brave choice might be taking a different action other than completely stopping the one that you have identified.
I think it's good to remember too that like for a lot of us that have come here a long time, we've been doing a lot of healing work, but new people coming in, and then people that we encounter even at work in different places. This is real life stuff. This is why that we are in a mental health epidemic right now, is because we haven't known how to help people work through a process of things. And, in the religious circle, it's just, lay your hands on everybody and everybody be healed. And everybody can't always receive from that. And so we have to remember there's some people need to go through a process. And this is a great education for us, especially, I look at it and I think, wow, it's so awesome. I don't have that. And I don't have that. I don't have that. I mean, it starts feeling good about the process of healing we have gone through. But there's also people coming. There's also things in our lives that we need to deal with to, gain even more of a healthy behavior. But remember, if you step back and look at all this is all about time. This is all about what we do with our time. And numbing is just the time sucker of the world. And so there's not going to ever be a day where you've done a bunch of numbing behavior and you're like, man, I'm a champion of the world, And a lot of us, it might, your numbing behavior might be naps. Let's talk about naps again. It's these different numbing behaviors are because there's a real need under there. And so even if she's not in her examples as a therapist listing our examples here in our middle America world, try to find an example that you can apply these same things to, and even what other people that you hear about.
Yeah, I think she makes a really good point. If you have multiple things going on, multiple numbing habits, then you want to pick the one that's doing the most harm to try to stop first. So for this example of the person who's dealing with childhood trauma, they may have years and years where childhood trauma has led them to lead a certain life. That is the bigger problem than smoking at that point. And so, and I love the fact that, of course, here we're always involving the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit knows. I always saw it this way in a picture in my mind, as he knows which thread to pull on to unravel what the enemy has stitched together, and we don't know necessarily for ourselves, and we can't say we know absolutely for other people without the Holy Spirit's insight. And it may be different for one person than to another. It's not a formula about what order of things we need to address. What order that we need to address these things in. So again, no shame allowed in the process. And remember, braving is one small step at a time. So just like we talked about in the previous chapters, you might determine a course of action and then after a couple of days think, wait a minute, this has caused these other problems, or I've got new truth pieces, remember? And that now I need to go back and frame it again and reassess. You can always reframe and make a different choice, one step at a time. So then the third example is, finally, you might decide to leave your numbing behavior behind altogether. And in that case, you're going to have to brave a detox. A detox is a process of removing something toxic from your body, allowing yourself the opportunity to learn to function without that toxin. Catch that it is an opportunity to learn. It doesn't mean you know how to do it right away, but you want to create enough space to learn how to function. You need a period of time, a place in between, to allow yourself to adjust to living without that numbing device. And you also need to choose other healthier ways to cope. As you reduce your dependence on a numbing behavior, you'll likely notice new feelings that surface, vulnerable feelings that may be uncomfortable or unpleasant. Don't be alarmed. Those vulnerable feelings present you with a new opportunity to name, frame, and brave a healthier way to care for yourself. So if that's the case, then you just do this process that we've been talking about with the things that come up, and you deal with them one at a time the best you can. Now, this next section, she basically does a whole example of a detox, and it's a really good example, in my opinion. I just want to stress, and as you'll see in this next opinion, that what she talked about there was you're going to need time, and you're going to need space and the opportunity to learn. A lot of times, if you're doing a numbing behavior, it was to distract yourself from these things. So it's actually choosing to intentionally be in the reality of what you're experiencing. And we have to look at that. We have to be able to take the fear off of that. That's always been a big thing for me, is that if I had a trigger, I was triggered and I would go into a panic to try to solve it. Like, it had to be solved fast because I couldn't stand the anxiety of staying in the trigger. And that's what happens for a lot of us. But if we can remember, just invite the Holy Spirit in, remember that God's with you, Jesus is with you. Papa wants to surround you in this process and walk with you through this journey, that there is no fear to actually walking through it. There's no fear to actually facing it. Fear is a lie from the enemy. It's a lie that we have to be that afraid of looking at these things and even experiencing them. Remember, we talked before in some of the other chapters how a lot of things we're just afraid to feel things. We were afraid to feel certain emotions, so we would rather feel chaotic than feel disappointed. And if, again, we talk about it all the time here about how, Papa is eager to discuss how you feel with him. And you can tell him, there's nothing you can't tell him. You can tell him how angry you are. You can tell him how scared you are. And just going through that process will immediately break a lot of the panic and the fear off of facing the emotion, so that then you can get to a functioning level of actually looking at what's going on and how to care for yourself in that time. So there will be a lot that happens in a detox, but all of it is good and for the greater good of the end goal here. So let's look at this detox. So sometimes, I like how she introduces this example. Sometimes you notice the negative side effects of numbing before you become aware of the numbing behavior itself. So this is like a little side nugget she stuck in here. You may not recognize that a behavior is a problem, but you might recognize that there's something going on in your life that's actually a side effect of the behavior, but you don't see it yet. You're just starting to notice a pattern of some sort. She uses this in her example. She points out that she likes to do journaling as a great naming tool that serves as a form of self-confession and self-accountability. So she basically, however she does this, once a day or once a night, once a morning, I don't know, as acknowledging what's going on in her mind, what's going on in her feelings. So she's actually writing things down like, well, I'm really frustrated with myself. I'm resentful and I'm angry. I feel cynical about other people. So what she did was recognize, after a period of time, a pattern of those kinds of thoughts. So self-confession, self-accountability, of just actually logging what's actually going on with you without even having to necessarily do anything about it. You might notice a pattern over that time. So she did that and noticed this pattern, decided to name it. She gave it the name negativity. So all of those thoughts that she recognized were in the negative category. So she set out to frame it. She knew that wasn't like her normal character. It wasn't her normal bent on life. So she asked, what has changed in my life to evoke this negativity? When do I feel negative emotions, and how long have they been here? So she discovered that all after her framing, that the negativity was linked to every time she opened Instagram. So that was a great example of there was a side effect of the behavior that rose to the surface. She never would have in a million years thought it had anything to do with Instagram. But after framing it, she realized that she had been doing this numbing behavior of when she opened Instagram. And it was causing something that she didn't like in her life, causing a side effect of negativity. So the problem is, and this is what a lot of people have, is that many people use social media for work purposes, and it's a source of connection with people. So it complicates the notion of detoxing social media. However, if the negativity that you've named and framed is actually stealing joy from the work you do and your relationships, it's probably worth the cost of taking a break from social media. So again, this is a time where we're deciding to leave a numbing behavior, but you notice that she's just making a commitment for 6 weeks or so. She's saying, I'm just going to leave it completely. I'm going to stop doing social media for 6 weeks. I'm going to detox from it, as opposed to an earlier example where she was just going to modify when she did it, right? Do you see the difference? So this is actually not taking it completely out of your life for a period of time. And so, it's complicated because you might rely on it for work and you might rely on it as a means to stay in touch with people. But if in this case, this negativity was affecting so many areas of her life, then we have to recognize that's a bigger problem than the reality that I do need social media for work and to connect with people. And so it's worth it to take an actual detox, because in the detox, you learn more. You learn more about your situation. So she says, initially, a detox might feel great. The absence of all the noise in your mind might feel refreshing and like a welcome relief. You might also begin to recognize all the information your mind was needlessly working to store. You might also notice other compulsive habits that were related to social media, like compulsively responding to people without taking the time to think through whether, when, or how to respond. So just to elaborate on that example, obviously all this is on our phone, which we have the ability to do so many things on our phone. So she was so used to looking at Instagram all the time that she realized that since she was on her phone that often, she was also answering people's texts immediately instead of setting them aside and thinking about it. So she was making commitments and making decisions compulsively because she was looking at Instagram compulsively. So there are those side-by-side things that we might discover, but she wouldn't have realized that if she hadn't been detoxing Instagram. So every moment your hand impulsively reaches for your phone becomes an opportunity to take a breath and create a space in between where you can evaluate your next move. You might find that you bask in the new spaciousness that your social media has opened up. But then comes withdrawal, and you find that fear has crept into your new calm. You might start to worry about the ramifications of being off social media. Thoughts like, will I disappoint people who follow me? How will I connect with other people I don't see regularly? And what if people forget about me? Again, that's not your chance to just throw everything out. You go back to your naming, framing, and braving, and you just do this process again with the new thoughts. So it's a fear thought. It's your chance to name and frame the fear. And so you actually acknowledge it. You say, I see you, fear. I see that. And I understand. It's true. It's scary. It's scary making a change. You're honest and compassionate with yourself. Remember we talked about last month that fear isn't dealt with by bullying yourself. And again, remember that with other people. So if you're helping somebody go through a detox and they have this withdrawal and other emotions come up, you don't want to just try to beat it down with a stick. You got to be compassionate with it and let them talk about it. Let's address it. Help them do this naming and framing of the new thing that has come up. You don't want to gaslight yourself or try to logic it away. Don't try to just muscle past it and use your willpower to say, nope, we made a decision. We're going to stick with it because that's what good people do is we stick with it. We made a commitment. That's not what you do. You need to acknowledge the new thought. As she said, we don't want to try to solve one thing that's in the I shouldn't feel this way category by introducing it again by saying I shouldn't feel this way. So you want to remind yourself that two things can be true. Yes, you might disappoint some people, and it's true that you need to do this for your own health. There's so much freedom in that. Can you guys feel that when you just acknowledge the truth? That's that place in the past for me, like so much anxiety and tension would come in because two things obviously feel true to me, but I didn't know they could both exist. I didn't know that it was just life. They both exist. I didn't know that it wasn't paralyzing for two things to be in conflict like that. There's actually a path forward when there's a conflict inside like that. So, you might disappoint some people, but you also might inspire others who struggle with social media. So see, you've got to allow yourself to look at that two things can be true. And I bet when you're in that initial moment of fear, you're not thinking about the fact that you might inspire somebody. It's usually not what happens when you're in fear. As you just look at the fear that comes up when you're in withdrawal, the fear will start to dissipate, or the other emotions, the other things that come up, it will start to dissipate if you will take a moment to look at it. And you'll remember, you begin to build more trust with yourself. We have broken down our own trust with our own selves by doing this process wrong or not doing what she's teaching us in this book. And so you will actually build more trust with yourself. In other words, internally, you'll say, you know what? It's safe for me to say, I feel a little conflicted about this. It'll be safe to admit to yourself. And once you admit it to yourself, you can actually think through it and do something. Whereas if you just stuff it and ignore it, it becomes really toxic inside. So when you brave a detox like this, attuning to yourself in a new way, you have the opportunity for your joy to return in countless ways. She's going to list a few things here that happen in that space you created, okay? And this happened for her personally. She didn't know that these things were lacking. She wasn't aware of them. Remember, all she was aware of was that I've got some negative thinking going on, but she's discovering all of this. So in this time of a detox, she found that joy returned in countless ways, and you may become more aware of your own needs and capable of actually meeting them. You become more present with your family and the people in your real life instead of people on social media. And for your creativity and imagination to start showing up again and reminding you of how much you delighted in the way they would lead you to whimsical impulses to dance, take an adventure, or be silly. Isn't that interesting? I mean, you think that's a crazy thing to realize that something that just started off by being noticed with some negative thinking actually led to rediscovering how much she enjoyed her creativity and imagination. And I know that's something that's really lost on this generation that's always had a phone. I mean, I remember I watched that documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was talking about how he laid in bed when he was in Germany as a kid, and he just laid there all the time thinking about being a bodybuilder and a successful blah, blah, blah. It's like kids aren't doing that these days. We are that space of just letting your imagination and your passion rise up and dream of what things could be like. That is the stuff that, miracles are made of, that's the hardy, passionate people are developed in those moments where we are actually we just have space and we just have time. And that's deliberately worked against in our culture right now for children and adults. We hardly ever give ourselves a time, even just 10 minutes of having nothing going on. I remember when cell phones became popular, and I remember when my friend told me that her boyfriend took his phone to the bathroom with him even, and I was like, that's ridiculous. Why would he need his phone in the bathroom? Like, that sounds so crazy. And now, now who goes to the bathroom without their phone? It's just like, that's precious time. I could look at something. I could be doing something in this 2 minutes. This has developed over our culture where we are constantly doing something. We are maximizing every single minute. And we have to recognize that there is a part of our humanity and God's creation that is being denied access to our lives. It's being cut off. It's being starved. And I was just telling Tisa, she was asking me if I was going to say this, but I'd have to read more about it and learn more about it. But I saw this little clip about one of the guys who helped create Facebook and how he became convicted at some point because he realized that they were developing a technology deliberately around a human weakness. They had figured out what happens internally in our brains with dopamine release, and they purposely designed technology to trap people into something that would be harmful for our brains and our minds. And it's like saying if something's addictive and you're going to consistently put it in front of your children every day. Kind of like when you put that bone in front of Oreo. See, that's why that bothered me. She was teasing the dog the other day. Anyways, putting something she couldn't have right in front of her face. That was a rabbit trail. It was my rabbit trail. Anyways, we have to realize we are living in a culture where it is hard to resist those types of things because there are things in our world right now that were deliberately designed to trap you. They were designed to trap you, and that's not an exaggeration, but we are heavily bent that way. And so it's going to take some intentional detoxing of things to just even discover maybe how God made you and what your original design was. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like discovering what your original design was. You will love yourself and the way God made you. So, you find your way in a detox back to a place of play and rest and a peaceful mind. naming and framing and braving a detox like this begins to show you what needs to change. You may not plan to leave the activity like social media behind altogether, but you now see that some things need to change in order to hold on to what you've regained in the detox. So again, in the detox, she recognized some things that were harmful. Like she didn't realize how noisy it had become in her head, how much her mind was having to track all this data about people she doesn't even know that's not relevant. Like her mind has to process all that. So she noticed some negatives that were coming from it, but she also rediscovered some positives that had been missing because the time was just being taken up. And so with that information at the end of the detox, you then decide how to brave a next step to go forward. You have a lot more truth pieces about how to make active, powerful choices. Again, so you're not running on autopilot from Instagram. You're actually choosing what to do. You're choosing what to protect. You may choose to get back on Instagram or back on social media, but you may now have more information to recognize what it's costing you. And that's a motivator to put more of a guard around it and protect things you've identified. So we, again, living thinking, we are powerful, powerful beings capable of way more than just being run around by social media or a bunch of behaviors that we're doing because we don't know how to care for ourselves. So we are we are powerful, and we are powerful enough to take these steps and work towards meeting our needs in a healthy way. Which brings us to the next section, below the surface of numbing behaviors. So there's naming the actual numbing behavior, and then the second layer is equally crucial, and that's the painful emotions that led to the numbing in the first place. Like thinking traps, numbing is almost always self-protective. There's a reason you do it, typically to prevent the experience of painful or vulnerable feelings. Here are 7 common emotions that may surface as you work to eliminate your numbing behaviors. She lists shame, fear, self-doubt, guilt, a sense of being unseen, unappreciated, or overlooked, loneliness, sadness, and she threw in as a bonus, anger. And I thought it was interesting. She said that women especially often numb themselves as a way to avoid feeling the uncomfortable emotion of anger. And I know that's true, along with all the other feelings. If you haven't known that how to deal with feelings, and feelings can be really intimidating. I mean, they can really be scary, and we can go to a lot of effort to avoid them. But again, we've learned around here, hopefully everybody here has learned, at least on some level, that these feelings aren't bad and they're not the end of the world. They're not going to kill you. You're not going to die. And that it's actually okay to feel them, including anger. And so anger gets a bad rap a lot of times, that, you think you're not Christian if you're angry or whatever, but anger has a place, and you might be feeling anger about something for a really good reason. And you may not be able to see that reason right now, but I love the example that's kind of a serious one, but in religion, a lot of people rebel and are extremely angry at the church, at Christianity, at people of God, because they were demonstrated a religious, example of who God was. And so, not that we want to promote a bunch of rebellious activity or anything, but you might have been right to be angry at what was demonstrated to you. You might have been, not that you should do something. The Bible says be angry, but don't sin. So it's what you do with your anger that's an issue, not the feeling of anger. So you might actually find a great connecting point with God in your design that might actually justify and validate who you are by acknowledging anger. I mean, we share funny stories around our house about things we did as a kid that we now realize were examples of our God design, but we got in trouble for them as kids, because they weren't refined. We didn't know what to do with it, but the feeling was right. The feeling was what God made for us to have and was an appropriate response. What you did with it, maybe not so much. But so that's just a great example. Anger is not a 4-letter word. It's not a sin. And so we have a lot of times developed a fear of these feelings and a justification for avoiding them. But we want to get to what's underneath what's actually driving the need for the numbing behavior. When you notice any of these feelings, you might be tempted to head right back to that numbing behavior. But remember the words of wise King Solomon: there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. There's a time to feel your sadness, your loneliness, and even your anger. And I think that is one of the things that the misconceptions I had is I literally thought these feelings could take me out. Like I literally thought they could just be the end of me. And I didn't trust that they would ever leave. If I allowed anger to surface, if I allowed sadness or disappointment to surface, I thought it would, somehow I thought it would just go on forever. But they don't last forever. And with God, there's a way to go through them and be healed. And so there is a time, there's an appropriate time to allow those feelings to come to the surface and deal with them. And they won't last forever, because on the other side of that is a time to celebrate and dance and enjoy your life. I like this quote from Anne Lemke, from a Stanford psychiatrist. She wrote in her insightful book, The Dopamine Nation, with intermittent exposure to pain, we become less vulnerable to pain and more able to feel pleasure over time. In other words, to keep pain from becoming too big, you need to tend to the right amount of pain in healthy ways. Isn't that interesting? I mean, maybe this is just my medical side, but that's how allergy shots work. If you have allergies, you have this huge reaction, like when I first moved to Texas, I didn't know what was going on with me. My eyes were watering, my throat was swelling up. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't talk. My nose was running. I'm having this huge, massive reaction to stuff in the air. So what do? You go to the doctor, they start giving you allergy shots where they expose you to small amounts of what you are actually allergic to over time. So your reaction comes down. So your body then learns it's not actually life-threatening, and you don't have as big of a reaction. And so I think it's interesting that in our emotions, that can be the same way. This concept is that if we would actually acknowledge that we're in pain a little more often, we would learn that it's not so scary. Because remember, you're learning to trust yourself more, and you're actually facing pain helps you learn that it's not as life-threatening. It's not going to take you out. So I think that's a really powerful thing to remember as we go through these processes of allowing these things to come up. So how do you tend to your pain when that's coming up? Again, you can always go back to start this process over. Name it. Just start with naming it. I'm scared. I'm anxious. I'm lonely. I'm exhausted. This is something that Tisa has really had to help me with, because I was so overwhelmed by the intensity of my emotions and I was so unfamiliar with them. I didn't know what to call it. And I had a really hard time even calming down enough to try to call it something. So again, the naming step is extremely powerful, to just stop and try to give it a name. Talk to a friend about it and maybe they can help you. Remember, we handed out a list of, 100 different feelings. Start learning some language. Remember, we're learning more language. So we're not just saying I'm weird or wonky, or it's not just sad, glad, mad, and whatever. It's some bigger words. We can learn a bigger vocabulary and learn ourselves. I'm always telling Tisa my language is always changing with her, because I'm just scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. Well, then it became, I'm just nervous. Well, nervous is different than scared. And then she would try to say, well, I think you're nervous. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just a little uneasy, the more I started to learn, she couldn't even keep up with me, because I realized everything doesn't feel like fear. Some things I'm in a panic about. That's different than fear. I'm panicking. Anxiety is different than just fear. You got to learn some language. Then the more you know about yourself, the more you can help meet your needs appropriately and discuss it with other people in your community to actually get help, because people are more willing and eager to help us with how we're feeling than we have probably acknowledged. So remember, naming in and of itself brings relief, and then you finally get to the root. You've painstakingly and lovingly gained access to a sacred place of need, and you can now do the work of identifying the good things your mind, heart, and body crave. So she says, take a deep breath, move your location, and ask yourself the following framing questions. Again, this is when one of those emotions has come up. What do I need in this moment? I mean, this, again, I didn't even know how to answer these questions. What would soothe my fear, my anxiety, my loneliness? What would bring my exhausted body relief? Again, a lot of us have no clue. We have had no practice doing this step because it's never been given any validation or acknowledgement of needing some time. And so don't panic and don't be hard on yourself if it's really hard to answer that question. I still have to tell my friends all the time, like, well, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. I don't even know what I'm feeling. I don't know. And so what do I don't know what to do with myself? Is that what I say? Yeah. I don't know what to do with myself. Apparently that's one of my phrases. She could probably tell you a lot of them, but it is a lot of times it starts off with, I don't know. And at first I've had to get through the fear of not knowing, because not knowing would make me more afraid, would make me want to just return to whatever distraction. And, sometimes I still do that. Sometimes I'll just say, no, I'm just going to go busy myself and maybe I'll go clean or something like that. But other times I'm like, okay, no, I can do this. I'm going to stay in it and think a little bit more and just try to think of what feels good. And sometimes it's really clumsy language. Like I can't think of an exact example, but there have been times like, well, I remember that when we went for a walk, we used to go walk around that pond every now and then. And that felt good. And I want that feeling in this moment. Like that's clumsy kind of language, but it worked. It's like there was something about going to walk around the pond where there were ducks and I could look at the ducks and I might be distracted by, the being fascinated with nature. There's something about that felt good. And I couldn't tell you what that feeling was exactly, but I knew it's what I needed. And that might be all I could start with. And so, maybe I'd go for a walk. And then over time, I start to learn more. I think that's one of the things I have learned is that it's really soothing for me to have quiet time, downtime in nature where I can just look around and observe things. And, now I watch the birds through my binoculars, so I don't even have to go to the pond if I don't want to, stuff like that. So you learn yourself, you learn those things, but you're never going to learn it if you don't stay in the moment of the not knowing. So here's the good news. You can learn to replace numbing behaviors with the care you actually need. And that's just a solid truth you have to decide is factual, because we've all been influenced by a lie that says there's nothing that anybody can do. You can't change this for me. I mean, I've gotten really mad at Tisa before because I'm like, well, this is never going to change. It's never going to change. Why are you trying to get me to hope for it's going to change? There's nothing we can do about it. Why would I talk about it? There's nothing we can do about it. It's not true. Got to let that moment pass. It's a nice way of saying it, isn't it? Just let that moment pass on by. We'll reconvene in a few moments. Try me again in 30 minutes when I've gotten myself under control. This next little chart is called Braving Care, and it's some really good examples in these 5 different categories. Again, it's something that it's like a foreign language for a lot of us. We're going to have to learn. We just are going to have to learn how to do these things. Relational care, so talking with a safe friend, attending a support group, spending time with family, playing with children, or even enjoying animals can provide comfort, empathy, and understanding. So there may be times when you're like, I need to be with people. I need to interact with somebody. Sensory care, listening to music, lighting a candle, wrapping up in a soft blanket, or immersing yourself in a beautiful setting can soothe your senses and evoke the feelings of calm, warmth, and contentment. Now, remember, you're not a one-stop shop. You're actually a really complex, beautifully created being. And so you're going to need different ones of these at different times. So you're not going to have just one thing you go to every single time. You might try that for a while. It might work a little bit, but you want to continue to expand the tools in your tool belt to know what is out there, and then you begin to fine tune how to meet up with the different needs you become aware of. Recreational care, actually doing something, gardening, cooking, painting, playing sports, or watching a movie can help you process negative emotions and inspire creativity. And if you're doing this with friends, it's really great this is like a language you can even develop with each other. Because as I said, the people in our lives are a lot more willing than we think to help us on this journey. And I'm remembering there was a season where we were playing pickleball. 4 of us were playing pickleball twice a week. And I used to play tennis, and I love tennis, so it just did something for me, so pickleball is close enough. And I wanted to slam the ball. I wanted to, slam that ball so hard. But when we were playing with 4 people, that wasn't very friendly or conducive. And so I wanted to do some overhead shots and just slam it down. And so I had told Tisa before, because we got in some discussion about it, and I was just like, that just feels so good. Like, I feel so much better after doing that. So a good friend she is, at the end of our pickleball game, we would take like 2 minutes, and she would lob some balls for me, and I would just do those overhead shots, just one after another, like as many as I could in our little 2 minutes that we had. And I was like, thank you. It felt great. I mean, we can do that for each other, You can say, hey, look, I'm really trying to meet a need here. You want to go for a walk with me? You want to shoot some hoops with me? You want to go whatever? People are happy to do that. Happy to do that with you. Let's see. Physical care, exercising, taking a walk, hydrating, practicing deep breathing or stretching can help you feel rested, nourished, and rejuvenated. Those are all really good things. And another thing we talked about here was stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system. If you're in a lot of anxiety and everything, you're often stuck in that sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight mode. And remember, what's the other one called? Rest and digest. Yay! Cheryl remembered. You guys remembered this time. That's great. Rest and digest. There are physical things you can do, exercises and stretches and things to help shift your body into the parasympathetic nervous system, into rest and digest. So we can learn these things, learn how to be intentional about introducing them when we notice that we have or are being triggered to go into one of these numbing activities. Spiritual care, praying, meditating, reading scripture, or singing songs of praise can bring solace, perspective, and encouragement. I hope we all know that around here, how good that is. And, I like to just add that we are not about the religious spirit around here, and God's okay with the other 4 categories of meeting your needs, okay? He doesn't say that you have to be on your knees every single moment of every way of meeting your needs. It's not all about the Bible does talk, and there are definitely some clues in there, things you can do to help. But he didn't mean them in a religious way, like everything had to be some singing what do you call them? Chorus? What do you call them? Chorus, yeah. Chorus, yeah. Hymn. Yeah. Singing a hymn before that. You don't have to sing a hymn to meet your needs. He's fine with you going to play pickleball. And he can be in that too. I mean, he loves to do all of it with us. All the things. Okay, so our last little section, I just liked how she said this. The goodness your soul craves. Naming, framing, and braving numbing behaviors isn't about becoming a machine of rigid self-denial, nor is it the drudgery of willpower. Willpower can get you so far in life, but that is not what you don't want to live out of pure willpower. It will eventually fail on you. So it's not about, again, we're not doing that rigid religious thing about self-denial. God actually intends for you to have and enjoy your life. He came so that you may have and enjoy your life in abundance, overflowing, all of that he's provided for us. He wants you to have that, and he's made a way for you to have that. So rigid self-denial and just trying to overpower these things is not the goal. In fact, it's the opposite. It's attuning to the intricacies of your mind, heart, and body and learning what brings you comfort, relief, peace, or delight. It's bravely refusing the counterfeit comforts and deadening distractions that beckon you from every direction. Don't you want to just take a stand for God even in this? Like when I see counterfeit things, I'm like, oh God, that's just an affront to you. Like, God, you're better than that. Like, I want your name to be glorified more than that. I want people to know you, and I want to live authentically by displaying that. And this is one of the ways we do that, is not settling for counterfeit anything when God has an authentic way that he's made. We want to reject the counterfeits in every area of life. It's turning toward the goodness your soul craves and the goodness all around you. I like that she put that in there because, again, God made it for you to have. It's out there. It's available. Remember, we just said the other day, the kingdom of God is near. The kingdom of God is within reach. The kingdom of God is now. It's available. We are not waiting. We don't have to wait till heaven to experience the benefits of who he is. We need play. We need rest. We need comfort. We need to escape through the power of our imaginations. These are all good things. The enemy of our souls has excelled at distorting otherwise good gifts and turning them into shackles. Can you believe that? That's actually a way he's stolen some of the good things God's made, is by contributing to turning them into something that has you in bondage instead of something that's for your enjoyment. When we are constantly checking our phones, our feeds, the news, our text, or distracting ourselves in countless other ways, we are not creating those quiet places in between where real rest and deep nourishment occur. It's going to take some time. This is not the fast food we're not looking to feed our souls through fast food, okay? We're looking for the feast. That's where you sit down and you enjoy it for a while. Numbing your emotions keeps you from the wild, purposeful, sometimes scary, deeply important life that God created you to live out. On the other hand, naming your emotions empowers you to care for yourself and shape your reality as you align with God's mission of turning chaos into harmony and infusing life with goodness. When you name, you come alive to yourself and to God and to the wonder all around you. You feel that wild surge of aliveness as you savor the feeling of fresh soil under your feet or lose yourself in the starry sky as night descends. You honor the tears that well up in your eyes as a tender moment overtakes you. You delight in the laughter that bursts forth as you rehash a child's antics. You marvel at the flash of insight or the epiphany that comes when the dots of a problem you've been wrestling with suddenly connect. You cherish the surprised yet grateful feeling in your heart as you contemplate a loved one's actions. You are transformed by the almost imperceptible voice of God's Spirit whispering, "Your life is precious." That's what we're saying yes to when we decide to do this and partner with this pattern, this program that she has so eloquently put together for us.
So good. Just love how that it just keeps unfolding into more areas of our life. Just how that we can. I think that one of the things that you'll discover just even as you look at these different things is that we've all been meeting our needs in ways that really aren't that fulfilling, and so you don't even know what it's like to actually have someone understand you and actually get a need met in a good way sometimes. And so I think discounting what is really behind it actually never leads to that healthy transition. And so all this is just, about being able to see all these different things through new eyes. And I think that for me, just knowing how much our minds are not that healthy. I mean, I see it in every way possible. I just love to learn more and more things. When I first started this journey when I was young, I was probably 11 or 12. And then on into my teen years, I learned more about personalities. That personality discussion back, 40 some odd years ago now was a really cool insight. And I think the things that we're learning now, even last summer with her other book about our soul, and this summer about this book, it's just more information like that, to where we realize we're not that complex. We're not that hard to figure out. We actually just missed the mark, or somebody missed the mark with us. I know for Cece, I mean, even today, just helping her to actually name and say what she feels, it's like her first step towards saying something that feels really big to her, but it's actually really small. Yeah. I mean, it's really solvable. But I mean, sometimes it's hard for me to just get her to say that first step of saying what it really is, because for her, she's got a whole history of people discounting it, a whole history of people not understanding it, a whole history of everybody. I mean, when I first met her, she said, I just make everything hard for everybody. And I'm like, that can't even be true. I mean, it just can't even be true, and so when we begin to understand more about what we really need, I just really invite y'all to just participate in seeking out some of these answers. And I think you'll discover a lot more joy on the other side of knowing that you're not that complicated. Isn't that good news?
Right.
Anyway, let me pray over us, and Lynn's going to come. So, Papa, we just thank you for all the ways that you're creating a healthy culture in us. And I just speak to all these emotions even tonight. Maybe some that got triggered, or some that are just so dormant, or some that we can't even understand and we don't think things apply to us. I just ask that in the coming days, you'll just bring your revelatory power to us, and you'll be able to help us to see things in our own lives that are actually easy to solve, easy to change. It's not difficult. And I just thank you that your Holy Spirit is here as a helper, as a comforter, to guide us along the way. And so we just bless Dr. Cook tonight for writing this amazing book, and that we get to participate tonight. And thank you for Cece for unfolding all the topics and information so we can understand it better. In Jesus' name.